There has not been anybody. This whole politics in Africa, only two people have walked on the streets to follow people to where they are going. Nkrumah and my mother.
Today, I'll be explaining a movie titled Funmilayo Ransome Kuti. This story is inspired by true events that took place in Abeokuta between 1900 to 1955. A quick disclaimer: this summary is provided solely for educational purposes and is not a substitute for watching the complete movie. It is intended to encourage viewing the entire film. To watch the movie, kindly click the link down below. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, kindly hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for more interesting summaries. My name is Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, wife of the Right Reverend Israel Ransome Kuti, mother of Dolupo, Olikoye, Fela, and Bekolari. The movie starts with various radio presenters telling us about the raid on Fela's house, king of Afrobeats, by various men in police and army uniforms, and his mother, Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, was a victim of the attack as she was staying with him at the time. Funmilayo started narrating about the incident. She was staying with her son. All of a sudden, an explosion happened, and when she tried to run to ask people around what was happening, they dragged her, asking where is Fela, that if they don't see him, she would be killed, and they threw her over a 2-story building. But luckily, she came out alive and was rushed to the hospital. While in the hospital, a human rights activist arrived to ask about her biography and all the incredible things she achieved as a human rights activist and what she did for the women in Abeokuta. It all started in the year 1900. My father was a son of freed slaves and traded lucrative farm produce, and because of his education, called himself an agriculturist. And he was very popular and believed in the power of education and taught me how to push boundaries. Back then, I was known as Francis Thomas, and I was 13 years old and had just finished my primary school at St. John's Primary School, Abeokuta. But my father had greater visions for me. My father took me to Abeokuta Grammar School, but I encountered many challenges, being the only girl in the school, but I was determined, and that was where I met Israel Ransome Kuti. Israel was the love of my life. Over time, we exchanged letters, and Israel was granted a scholarship to Fora Bay College in Freetown, Sierra Leone. We had to part ways, but promised to keep in touch and write to me as he has been doing every week, and he did that for the 4 years he was gone. A year before he returned, I went to England to further my studies, and Israel got back and became the principal of our alma mater. And we continued to exchange letters and pictures, and I told him that I no longer go by the English name Francis, but rather my middle name Funmilayo. So after completing my studies abroad, it felt good to see my lover again. A year after I returned, Israel proposed to me and introduced me to his family. Israel's father was the then reverend of the community, and I decided to open a school to teach children whose parents could not afford to send them to school and promote education in my community, just the same way my father supported my education. But for the son of a market woman who couldn't come to school, my life might have taken a different course. I went to the market to inquire of the woman why her son couldn't attend school, and I got to know about the happenings in the community of how the king's guards called the parakoi came to the market to collect the tax imposed on them by the king and molest anyone that cannot pay. So I went to the head of the patriarchy and slapped him. He reported back to the king, who was displeased with what I had done. I went to the market again to meet up with Israel's cousin, who was into adire making, and she also lamented about the heavy tax imposed on them by the king. I told her that it was time for the women of Egba to rise up and fight the injustice being imposed on them. I met with various women of Egba community, most especially women of elite status, and we came together to form the Abeokuta Women's Club. The Alake kept to his promises and rained hell and brimstone on the market women. And I met with the Abeokuta Women's Club that we are not doing enough to help the market women, and I brought the suggestion of creating the Abeokuta Women's Union, which was kicked against by few women in the club, but we later agreed to open the union. So we called the women to hear their plights and grievances about the happenings in the community, and I told them that it is time to stand against the injustice and tax imposed on the market women. And I went to meet the Alake to tell him about the market women, but I was not allowed to speak since I'm a woman and was asked to leave. I gathered all the women to tell them that the Alake is refusing to hear them, not knowing that the Alake has infiltrated some of the market women, and some decided not to join us for the fight. With the few women that were in agreement, we went to the Alake house. We brought food to feed ourselves and picked out matching uniforms to foster unity among ourselves. But after various days, the Alake didn't agree to our demands. It attracted the attention of the Lagos press, and they posted about the protest on various newspapers, and a representative was sent to see that the protest didn't get out of Egba land. The king called me and said 10% of the tax will be removed, but I refused, as we want it totally abolished, and I came back and told the women that they will continue and will not give up until the king agreed to their demands. The king sent his guards to beat the women and chase them out. A lot of women were injured and were locked up, and I thought of giving up. But remember that my father always say you should never quit, as long as you are fighting for the right cause. Words got out and women gathered from around neighboring communities, and soon the whole of the king's palace was crowded, and the king's chief advised that they flee for safety to Oshogbo, and the women invaded the palace and took the king's staff, and the women of Egba land were victorious. While fighting for the women of Egba land and the market women, I didn't know that my husband was at the last stage of his cancer and had little time left. He died the April 55th, a year after my father and a year before my mother, and I just wished that we could have one more day. And that is the end of my story.